Hi, welcome back to our podcast. This is Superpower and Sidekick. I am Cinda,
And I am Kim Ang.
and we team up together with Spirit to live a life beyond our imagination.
Yes, indeed.
Well, teaming up with Spirit to live a life beyond our imagination, and I have the traveling bug. It has bitten. And anyone that knows me knows that I'm a traveler. I've been on at least 65 international trips, like 20 something countries. I'm not exactly sure anymore. There's a lot of things about traveling that wasn't necessarily to do with what we were doing before, even though we got to go travel some. There were things that was happening and to me, for me, all that kind of stuff that I didn't even have names for when it first started happening. I would feel these activations and could see these things light up, and it was just, and it was what I think I actually read the book, one of Dan Brown's books, and it's totally fiction, but he was the first to describe for me what ley lines and these types of activations are, and I had already been doing it for a number of years. Um, and it
And what
has a
is that
spell
exactly?
ley lines. So the planet itself has a planetary grid, magnetic grid, and the the Earth herself is also multidimensional. It's not just the third dimensional realm, like what we are physically encountering it right now. She, like us, has chakras and a whole energetic system, and is also multidimensional. Um, right now, everything is kind of laying in dormancy, and it has been for quite some time. And I didn't realize it at first, but I realize now that I myself, and I know I'm not the only one, I've encountered several other people that have had very similar experiences to mine, but going to a location and having it just light up. We went to Acoma Sky City. It's a native place here nearby just a couple years ago. I think it was 2018. And Mike was with me. And as soon as we stepped out of the car, I felt it when I stepped on it. And I knew I'd stepped on one of those activation lines. And as soon as I look up to say something and I see a bright blue flash, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I saw the line. I saw it light up." And he saw it go through my body and, to two different directions going that way. Um, I went to Hawaii, yeah, 2 years ago with a friend of mine, and I went to, I just, angel rings. Um, uh, the Airbnb host, her and I kind of hit it off, and I had her take me to one of the sacred places. And please excuse me, I don't know how to, and never can pronounce the names of stuff. So rather than being totally wrong, I went to the sacred space where, like, the kahuna and, the powerful shamans and the spiritual people in Hawaii went to prior to the colonization. And while I was there, I was walking around and I felt it was this quadrant of my brain. The whole thing lit up and I could feel all the supercells light up in my brain.
Hmm.
Almost like you could feel a fingertip. I could feel it all in my head. And so sometimes it's where we are, reactivating, but sometimes it's activating us. And most times it's a little bit of a combination of the two. And those are just the latest. I mean, excuse me, when I went to France, it was, I've been on two different major trips to France. I've been there a few other times just going through. But one of them, I was able to travel around all of South France, and I had stuff happen with Mary Magdalene and with the Knights Templar, and had a message from the Knights Templar that there were portals from France coming into New Mexico, and that they had been coming here long before the Spaniards came in the 1600s. I think they were even up 1500s, and New Mexico was actually inhabited by Europeans long before the Mayflower came over, for instance. So history being what it is. But before the boats came, they were actually using the energetic grid of the planet to be able to by location and come to different parts of the world.
And are these spirits that are coming through that energy? What's happening there?
I believe that our physical bodies can to some degree. I think it is more of a bilocational, that we are multidimensional. So our energetic body can travel through these portals, and we don't have to be crossed over to do that. We can do that while actually there. I have experienced teleportation. It is real. There's no one that can tell me that it wasn't. Some of the experiences I've had. I went to a place near here. It's called Chimayo. We weren't living in the state at that time. We were actually living in St. Louis, and we were in a wedding in Reno, and we were driving back, and I kept hearing Chimayo, Chimayo. I'm like, I think that's New Mexico. And I'm from here, but I had never been there, and I'd not really heard of it. It's in the northern part of the state, and I'm from other parts of the state. And I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, wow, it is. It's northern New Mexico. So we just like beat down just real quick as we're going back. And as soon as I walk up, it's almost, I never watched the Power Rangers, but my kids did. So I would walk by and you'd see them. But that was exactly the feeling whenever I walked up to the church at Chimayo, because almost all of these locations have been taken over by a Catholic or a Protestant church. But as I walk up, it's like all three rings to come together, but in one moment I am in Chimayo, and I am in Chateau Reine, France, and I'm also in Chennai, India, where Saint Thomas was martyred. And I actually felt the temperature change in India, but it all happened in a flash of a moment.
It's just a flash. It's not like you're gone for
Yeah.
hours or
No,
days.
that time it was just a flash. One time we were in a natural hot springs in Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada. It's actually named after us, believe it or not. Las Vegas, New Mexico came first, but it's because there's beautiful hot springs and natural. That is one of the things that I have found. Volcanic activity does seem to, I've noticed things are more active in active volcano areas. But we were sitting in a hot tub, Mike and I both, and I had a flash, and I was in Lourdes, just whoom, and I knew I was in Lourdes. And I come back, and Mike goes, "We went to Lourdes."
Hmm. So he experienced it with you.
He went with me, and he's never been to Lourdes. I have. So all the places that I've zapped to, I have been physically at an actual physical time. And I don't know if that's part of being able to activate these doorways and get them, it's hard to not think in a science fiction way. And of course, I like science fiction because obviously I like this kind of stuff. And it is very much Stargate type stuff. I don't think that they're that far off. I think they got their knowledge from some truth.
Yeah, it's interesting how some of that rings true in Hollywood films, huh? The way that they portray certain things, like, oh, that's pretty spot on.
Even the Dan Brown works helped me to understand what was naturally happening to me. I would be called to an area. I had the message I was going to go to Lourdes, France 3 years before it actually happened. And I argued with spirit for 3 years. I thought I was just delusional as all get out. And it was so synchronistic and so perfect when it happened. I think I said something to you about, asked me about the trip, that I was late so that way I'd be on time. It was that trip. I'd had messaging for over 3 years about it. And I had gone to get two of my wisdom teeth pulled, and I had an appointment to get the other two pulled. And we come into the house, and my Skype is going crazy because, used to, all of our international friends would call us through Skype. And I was getting a call, and I get it, and it's a friend of mine, and she said, "Hey, we're leaving Italy, and we're going to Lourdes." And I'm like, I've been told for 3 years. I'm going, Lords, oh no, how am I going to do it? And we'd spent our last dime to get these wisdom teeth out. It was all we could do to get that done. And I look at Mike and I said, I'm going to call and cancel. I can't get those other two pulled. And he said, I'm not letting you go to France and end up with a abscess tooth or something like that. If I have to drag you, you're going to go get it done. And so he does take me. We go and get the other teeth pulled and we come back. I get on the couch and I'm like, okay, there's no way I'm going anywhere. And he comes back, walks outside and checks the mail. And he comes back and he said, oh, look, looks like you're going to France, and throws we just gotten our income tax return back that day. And yes, of course, we knew we were going to get an income tax return, but you never know the day that those things, and it just like was perfect setup. So I go ahead and I looked for my flight into Paris, but then I have to go from Paris to Lourdes. And I look and all the flights are completely booked. I even look and I can't, there's no way I could afford first class, but I checked them all and there was absolutely nothing. And I'm like, okay, I've always wanted to ride a train. That's fine. I'll just go from the train and save a little bit of money because I'm always doing it from, gathering every little bit we've got to make it happen. And so I get a train ride from Paris to Lourdes and get all excited. And the day I go to leave, there's a storm, and I sit on the tarmac in St. Louis for like 2 hours past the time I'm supposed to go. Everything's late. We finally get to Chicago, and Chicago's my out, so that's how I get out of the country. And there was another like huge delay. I was on the tarmac, God knows how long. And poor Mike was over in St. Louis going crazy for me because every single thing I was doing was super late. So he was starting to do this. And this was before, I think this was 2010. So it's really before we had a lot of cell phones and things like that. And I get into France to Lourdes, and I have like minutes left to catch my train. And I don't know European trains. This is the first time I've ever done it. I don't know anything. I've heard that they're good. That's as much as I know. And I get probably the one and only nice taxi driver because he was super nice in Paris, and I've been back and did not have that luck again. Um, it's very distinct in Paris of not getting the nicest taxi drivers, but I've got an experience in Sri Lanka that's almost better than this one. Sometimes taxi drivers are just angels. But anyway, I get a guy and he's totally willing. He's going to get me there. And I mean, we do the whole through France. It was like we were in a movie set or something. He was going for it, and I was holding on to the back seat. And he even pulls up to the train station like this sideways, comes into at the door. He's like, "Look, there you go. Grab your. If you run, you've got your train." And he gets out and he throws my bag at me, and I run. I run up, and the train is literally leaving as I run up. And it was that time of the month for me, and it had been a long, drawn out. I'd been late, and I just hit my knees and started crying. I just bawling. It was just more than I could handle. And I go in and I use a payphone because that's how we still communicated back in that time. And I called Mike Collect back in the States, and he answers it, and he gets a hold of a friend of ours in Poland. And the friend from Poland said, "Oh, tell her it is no big deal just to go up to the train ticket and they'll get her one for the next hour, an hour later. It's no big deal." I'm like, oh, okay. So I go and wash my face, get a bottle of water, get a bite to eat of some kind. And I go up, and the lady's just so sweet. "Oh yes, honey, we can get you on the next train in an hour. It's $18 or eight. It was €18, I think. It was really nothing." And I go up and I walk towards the train, and the group that I was meeting in Lourdes that were flying from Italy to Lourdes were standing in front of the train. And I think you remember Fernando, one of our friends, goes, "Oh my God, Cinda, how did you find us? No, we were on a plane until an hour ago. Our plans just changed. How did you know?" I didn't. I just had these miraculous flights that kept being late to make sure I was right on time. And I got to go with the group. on the train and go on to Lourdes. And I have more than one story like that. That one's just a cool one. But you can imagine with that much international travel, I've done it a lot of different ways. What I wanted to talk about that is one of the things that has recently, at least in the last 7 years, cut me off is that I have come up extremely chemically sensitive. The last few years of travel, I was having to go through a lot of different migraines and things that we could not get to the bottom of, that I did finally get to the bottom of, and they are chemical petroleum based fragrances, that the cheap type that they put in shampoo, conditioner, laundry, soap, cleaners, Febreze, um, balance. The list goes on and on and on, but they are extremely toxic. And come to find out, I'm not the only one who's reactive to them. There's kind of a whole little world of us that have been kind of kept under wraps and quiet, because there could be problems if people knew how dangerous these chemicals actually are. Um, I've watched my daughter literally pass out from them. They make her so sick. Um, so so it has curtailed my travel to some extent. But somehow or another, since then, I've been to Hawaii. I've been all over here quite a bit. Um, Whenever we went to Roswell the other day to pick up my car, when we drove past a certain space and I felt that ley line, and remember how we used to talk about the guardians of the area?
Mm-hmm.
That is also in line with this. You can feel different high being type frequencies that watch out, and you can feel them, the shift when you go from one area to somebody else's area, to be
Mm.
able to greet each of those guardians as you're traveling. And I know whenever I lived in St. Louis, there was one road that anytime I drove over it, I knew I was in a certain bounds in a certain area. And when I would go to Chicago, there would be one sign Mike and I knew it. We could feel the energy as we crossed it. And we knew we were in a certain guardianship area, a certain area that is different than other areas, so to speak. And so that is also seems to go along with this ley lines and activations and being called to locations. So I've felt Peru for many, many years. So when everything went not going to happen anymore, it's like, oh, there I am, Delta Dawn crazy again. I must be delusional. But no, two of our friends are doing a whole retreat over there, and she happens to not to have the same type of sensitivities as I have. Some of hers is like, she has a hard time with incense and some things like that, but it's enough that some of the trips that she planned are already pre-planned, non-fragranced. So it's funny how if you have a calling, even if you have some difficult circumstances, there are ways to work around them, and the door is still open and the water's still part, so you can get to the locations that you need to. When I was traveling hardcore, the first time I was going, my dad was like, Cindy, you can't afford groceries. How do you think you're going to leave the country? And then by the third trip, he's like, ooh, I'm on my way. It'll be fun to watch to see how you get to go this time. And he got to where he would come as soon as I just had the inclination, Dad, I think I need to go too. And he goes, okay, I'll go home, pack a bag. I'll be on my way to watch summer. And he wouldn't even question it or guess it after that. He was like, this will be fun. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. But whenever I first started, there was a lot of naysayers. There are people who are no longer friends because how dare I put travel on top priority instead of some other accomplishment that is more accepted. Did you have to go through any of that when you were traveling? People telling you you shouldn't travel?
Not
You
really.
come from a different world than I do because you come from Vietnam. So to even see your family, you
Yeah.
kind of got to travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but most of my family is here already. I mean,
Yeah.
my immediate family is already here, but no, I don't remember having any kind of difficulty with travel. It's like, oh, there's a seminar coming up. Okay. Somehow I'm there.
But I think that it's more culturally accepted in the Vietnamese culture than it is in American culture doesn't really accept for people going outside. They will they will actively try to do things to stop somebody. I experienced it. It was surprising. And then there was also a lot because almost all the trips, even though I would meet people there and back, and what I traveled by myself most of the time, a lot of the time. And even that, I would have to talk it through for the naysayers that I was okay and it's okay if I left the country and bad things weren't going to happen to me. And some of it I do think is they've been conditioned that other countries are way more dangerous.
And the fact that you're a woman traveling alone, that's just a no-no.
I did have some issues in Sri Lanka, and I definitely had to be a little bit more careful in Sri Lanka, but that was really the only country that I had to be a little bit more concerned and careful in. And I even had one time I had a 12, 13-hour layover. I was coming back from China, and I actually had a long layover in Sri Lanka, and then I had another one in Chennai. And I went and got a little beach house, a little beach, hotel thing in Sri Lanka because I thought, oh, 13 hours, that'd be great. I got in that little house and I had a very strict order in my head to not leave my room while I was there. And I knew it was serious and I didn't push it. I had had an experience in Sri Lanka one time. I had gone in the pool with other people, but whenever I went back to my room, I started getting messaging from some shipping mogul who would have been happy to purchase me and keep me as a trophy, I guess. And it was very unsettling because he called my room. He found my room number. So I kind of knew, and also in Sri Lanka, it's funny, all the things that ever, and I love Sri Lanka though. I would go back in a dime. It was beautiful, beautiful country and some really lovely people there as well. But I had to really watch the guys that had a lot of money in Sri Lanka. It was even the customs agents. I got a lot of offers just trying to come through customs. And that out of the 20 different countries I've been to, that's the only one that I've had to, keep my radar on. I might put, like, if I had something like this, I might probably would have put a little shawl on or something and just been a little bit more modest and whatnot.
So, if someone were to travel like that, I mean, what can you do to prevent something like that from happening, or can you even prevent it?
For myself, I was called by a spiritual calling to be there in the first place, and I really think doing the kind of travel, especially the kind of travel that I do, it's very important to be connected to source while you're doing it. Just like I knew that one time, do not leave the hotel room. I didn't ask why. I didn't try to go put my toe out onto the beach. I just went, I heard that and I am not going to go against it. I trust that message, and that's just it. The same voice that was calling me to go there would also give me my warnings. And it takes communication and trust really to be able to do a lot of that. But then there was also, I know one time we got off in Thailand and we were just having a great time and got off with some locals and we're gone a little too long. And next thing I know, we've got an old Thai woman just yelling at us up and down. And I couldn't understand a word she was saying, but I knew darn well she was telling us it is no longer safe out here and you need to get back to your hotel room now. I knew what she was telling us. You could see it in her eyes. You can see it with the gestures. She was going to make sure that we weren't out there, that it was, so even at the times where maybe we were excited and happy or whatever and didn't catch our clues, something around us let us know.
So, I guess that's the same if you were just vacationing or on a holiday and not particularly on a spiritual trip.
Y-
That as long as you stay connected. that whatever messaging you are supposed to receive to stay safe will be there to guide you.
Yeah, and I don't think you even have to be traveling at all. One time I was going to pick up Summer from school, and I stopped at a gas station, and it was very packed gas station, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And as I'm walking back to the car, I hear, "Get in your car, get in the van, and lock the door now." And it was, I didn't look up. I didn't even look around. I just went straight to, I bug eyed to my van, shut the door, locked it. The second I locked it, there was a man beating on my driver's side door. Help me. I need you to help me. And I hear in my head, "You put it in gear and you leave now." The guy chased me out onto the street asking me to stop. This was a full gas station. There was lots of people who were not a young woman in a van by herself to help him. So I think it's important. There's been, I can come up with almost five of those that I honestly believe my life was saved or something just because of those kinds of messages.
Yeah, definitely a good lesson to trust your gut and whatever voice you hear. Because I remember coming back from a grocery store to visit my parents, and it was like on garbage day. You know how they collect garbage, and I happened to turn into their street, and then the streets is pretty narrow, so everybody had their garbage cans like way out in the middle. So there's only one lane going in and out, and this garbage truck was coming out, and for some reason I stopped because I couldn't really get through. And then I looked at the guy who was driving the garbage truck, and I felt the energy, like it was creepy energy. It was like,
Right.
whoa, it's just like icky, right? And then so I was just sitting there and then waiting and looking around to see if there's a spot that maybe I can pull back and maybe he can go through, and then pulled in and then I can go through. But then I was sitting there and I kept looking at him, and just like that feeling just got worse and worse. And then immediately I heard this voice, back up, back up, back up. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I backed up.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
kept, it
That
was really
voice, I
strong.
don't see how you can do anything but what it tells you.
Yeah, yeah. It was like really, really strong, like back up, back up, back up. And so I did. And then finally he came closer. And then as he got the last garbage can up, and I was looking to see where I had previously been, and had I not backed up, he would have just slammed right into my car.
Right.
And as soon as he pulled in to where I found a spot I can go, I just left. It was like, whew, yeah.
When when my older two kids were young, back then I would, I would run errands to pay the electricity bill, I actually went by all the gas company, the electricity company, whatever. And when you ran errands all day, it was all day. We didn't have digital back then. This is 1990 something, way back. Yeah, it was 90s, not 80s. But anyway, I was driving around and I was doing all these, and I had to run by Walmart and some other things. I think just the Walmart, that's the only thing, and it was still brand new. So, because I remembered I actually called from the Walmart parking lot, because every single time I stopped and ran in and paid a bill, when I came back outside, there was the same city worker parked in his truck outside watching me. And then I go to the next place and there he was again. And then I go to the next place and there he was again. And it started really creeping me out, and I could feel things and it didn't feel good. And there's a whole nother one I just thought of. But because of that other one, I was actually in line with some of the probation officers and parole officers in town. One of them, his wife was my babysitter, so I knew them personally. And I just went ahead and called them, and I called them up rather than the cops and said, "Hey, am I just being delusional or crazy, or this just doesn't feel good? What do you guys think I should do?" Because they were friends. And he came back. He said, "Cindy, description of this man. And he was still in the parking lot. I could totally describe him. And I described him to him. And he goes, Cindy, don't worry. You will never see this gentleman again. Well, come to find out, he was on parole for sexual assault. And they took him off parole and sent him back in jail for following me. But those feelings matter, and acting on those feelings, though the reason why that one set up and I'd already talked to them was myself and a girlfriend that was living with us at the time kept feeling like someone was watching me. I kept feeling in my own home, felt like someone was watching me. I finally brought it, or actually, someone overheard a guy talking about what I looked like in ways that he shouldn't know how I looked at a bar in town. And this guy was a friend of ours and came up and said, got on to my ex-husband, how come you aren't protecting your wife? So-and-so's talking, Kiki, I remember the guy's name, was talking about you. And I don't care, he shouldn't have ever been doing that. And so then I think, yeah, my kids were at the babysitter. So when I picked them up and it was at the parole probation officer's house, I mentioned to him what was going on and what was said at the bar, and that I had felt for 2 weeks to 2 months like someone had been watching me. And he goes, oh, I've got your neighbor on for peeping Tom. That's why he's on parole with me. He was never there again. I never saw him again after that. So it was twice. And one other time, there's just a bunch of them. I was protected from many times. There was one time I was coming out, and my oldest daughter was still in a pumpkin seat. I was carrying her, and I was holding my son's hand, and I come out of our apartment, and a guy that had worked with my ex-husband was standing there. His brother-in-law, or his brother, lived in the apartment across from me. And he started talking to me, Cinda, what time you get off? So I think he wants a haircut. I'm like, oh, I'm working to 4 today. He goes, oh, okay, I'll come by and visit you afterwards. And I got oh, that feeling from head, nope, 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 nope. And I went and watched TV at my husband's place of work and waited for him to get off. And when we got off, we come home, we opened up our door, and there was a Pepsi can sitting on my coffee table. My husband and I both the time drank Dr. Pepper. We did not even like Pepsi. And you could see that the middle window of my windows had been pried open. That guy ended up getting arrested 4 days later because he had abducted a woman, kept her for 3 days, and some horrifying things. He went to jail for attempted murder that I had that feeling, and I did not go home because of. And I'm pretty sure he was in my house.
So yeah, gotta trust that feeling. If it doesn't feel good, gotta trust it. It's giving you that sense for a reason.
And I've had enough of it happen in the US that they weren't going to scare me about leaving the country. It's like, well, it can happen here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm still going to avoid it the same way I avoided it here. There were things in my youth. I was too young, and I didn't know, and I didn't understand guidance and a lot of things back then that I didn't. But after a certain age, I started getting messages, and I was protected more than once. And it still happens.
Guess that's one of the perks of being connected.
That's the superpower in Sidekick right there. You get to avoid, and and we can't avoid all things. For instance, my husband was in a horrible, terrifying car accident this year caused by a drunk driver. But it's very interesting. I know that the first time I ever received a message on it, I was in St. Louis in 2014. So I had a message on it 9 years before it happened. I had a whole download, and I was told, Cinda, you've been paying your dues your whole life. Mike's going to have to pay his dues all in one moment. And I had been through a lot of traumatic different things, especially in childhood, and he hadn't really been through much. And this was definitely his dose of trauma. Um, but then there was also 4 years ago, 2019, it was whenever that video was released that I did with Netflix for the promo. I had a message about something coming from it. And so I was praying, 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 praying for it to come. And I hear really loud and clear, Cinda, if you move forward right now, Mike won't make the cut. I'm like, oh, well, I don't, okay. We can be patient. I don't want anyone to suffer so I can move forward. And that, I'm not that kind of a person, especially not my husband. But I am 100% sure it was they've known about this car accident for a long, long time. And that this was going to happen in part of his. So even though sometimes our angels can't necessarily protect it from it, one of the things that happened, my husband is also a volunteer fireman. So he works in the area with other volunteer firemen. It's a pretty tight knit, all of Santa Fe County. So he had worked the week prior to that at the Turquoise Trail Fire Department with some of the kids over there. And there was a 17, 18-year-old girl that had worked with him. Well, the night of the accident, she was leaving Turquoise Trail fire station, and she saw smoke coming up from a vehicle. So she went straight to it. Well, she saw Mike and she knew him. And she started talking to him, Mike, hey, Mike, are you okay? And she talked to him until the paramedics and the rest of the firemen came. We've had we had some stuff happen at that time that basically let us know that she helped anchor his soul there in those first few moments, because he may have left at that time. So although I just chilled, just chilled.
Yeah, me too. Damn.
I've had lots of confirmation, and it's still coming, that because they had connected and made a friendship, she was there to help him, because angels help us through other people. And we forget that we are, people are moved through angels to help us, or vice versa. You know what I mean? So that, and then also he almost several weeks after had real bad blood clots, and I just, one day he was supposed to go in and have x-rays for his back, and they kept telling me, just give him 3 more weeks, just give him 3 more weeks, just give him 3 more weeks. And I'm looking at him going, he didn't have 3 more weeks. And I was getting really worried, and I just knew with all of my being that if I took him to that place to have x-rays, he wasn't going to walk out. And I can't go in with them there because it was really highly fragranced in that building. I could go to the doctor with them, but I couldn't go into the x-ray area. So I canceled his appointment, and took him straight to the hospital. He was this close to passing because of blood clots in his lungs. They told me I got him there in the nick of time. But that came from a feeling, a really strong feeling. One of the biggest fights Mike and I ever had, because he doesn't necessarily always understand these feelings. We were in St. Louis, and I wanted to get home really bad. And he's like, you're just being nervous. You're just having anxiety. Here, I'm going to help train you get over that. And he takes me to Burger King and like keeps me there hostage. I was losing my mind. When I finally got home, my oldest daughter had left 10 or 11 messages on my answer machine. It was before cell phones, and she really needed to get a hold of me, and I could feel it. So, we've had a lot over the years make it really big. Hey, if Cinda feels something, you better listen to it.
Lots of stories like that. And then there are ones where you don't listen to it and you ignore it, and then you kick yourself later, right?
Luckily, they have used ones that were overcome. It's like when you're really training with spirit, they will use ones that aren't too important to help teach you on. And this is something I've learned. Um, when I was first moving back to New Mexico, I'd had the message to move back, but we actually didn't have the cash to do it at the time. And it was the day that Trump was elected, 9/11, by the way, because the rest of the world writes it the other way. US is backwards. But on the 9th of November that he was elected, I woke up that morning, and on Facebook it said, if Trump gets elected president, I'm going to move out of the country to New Mexico. And I'm like, see, it's a message. I'm being told to move back. I wasn't even worried about Trump. It was just about moving back. And it was 3 o'clock that afternoon. I actually got a call from some people about my father had some mineral rights that paid us maybe $7 a year. They were like nothing. And oh, hey, we want to buy this from you for 10 grand. Shoot, I'm moving back to the New Mexico. Didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And how if you have a purpose, if you have a calling, how things but anyway, they had told me I came back to New Mexico to look for a place before Mike and Summer came. Before I left, I kept hearing in my head, you need to drive through Oklahoma City. Well, I wanted to do it different. I wanted to go through Kansas. I always wanted to do something different. And I totally went against what it told me. And I was halfway through Kansas when I get the call from the lawyer in Oklahoma. Oh, we're way ahead of schedule. We have these ready for you to sign now. I would have been in Oklahoma City at that moment if I had done what Spirit said. And I had to drive a whole extra day. And it was a real pain in the butt, all because I hadn't listened. But at least it wasn't, but I had to really, it's almost always for our own, so we don't have to work as hard, so we don't have to do things as hard. Almost always it's that way. I remember one time I was getting on a flight and I was exhausted because I'd been on the other side of the planet. It wasn't a domestic flight. I was trying to get home from an international flight, and I had a feeling that the flight was overbooked, and they were asking for volunteers, and I was all grumpy. Not me, I'm going home. And I go to get on the plane and I have this thought, oh gosh, but what if I need those tickets? I'm sorry, Spirit, if I just messed up, let me know. This minute I said that on myself, I hear the United people saying, come on, we just need one more volunteer. My I ended up just going to get something to eat and resting. I was able to get bumped from 3 flights and got 3 free domestic tickets that day. It was just one after the other I was able to get. And they ended up coming in very handy. I took my mom to New York and some other things happened that I would not have been able to do if I hadn't had those free tickets. So almost always when they're training us because they will train us how to work with them, they understand that they're invisible. And a lot of us are trained to not believe things that are invisible.
Mhm.
They actually understand all the dynamics of that and are happy to help us to work around and learn beyond that conditioning.
It's like one way or the other, you'll get the message.
It's it's almost like they will try even harder with us because they understand more. If it, Now we have to be already reaching out to them on some
Mm.
level. We do not get any angelic, celestial, or even really ancestor help without our free will saying, please help me. um when I work with clients, one of the main things I get about people is, they were asking for this at 3 a.m. and they're like, how do you know what I ask at 3 a.m.? I said, because they're listening and they whisper it in my ear. But as long as we are honest and asking, then they will help us go through our own barriers and learn through them, our own limitations and barriers. But we have to be like somehow or another actively working at the same time, surrendering to the higher knowledge, not trying to tell it what to do. That doesn't work ever. In fact, it's got bad. I've had things not fun happen that way. Those are the hard learning curves. Don't try to force spirit to do what you want it to do. But if you're called to something, they will come hell or high water, they will help you do it.
Yeah, it's like when it's meant to be, everything just falls into place and you don't realize, like, oh my God, how did this happen? I couldn't have planned it this way.
And that's just it. I think that's it keeps me in awe. And it still happens today as much as it happened. I know I'm fixing to start traveling again because I've been having a lot of it happen again recently. And I know that there are activations that I need, and some of the places that I'm being planned are places I have never been before. They're completely new. Through in UK, my last name's Campbell. Um, the other side of my family was strong, but that's also both of them I find out are Scottish. Um, and one of my friends that the teacher that I would be going with, she's Irish and into Celtic and all that. And one of the very first things I ever read on the spiritual path, I think, was Mist of Avalon. So, and literally, we're going to Avalon,
Oh, wow. Synchronicity.
big time.
So what do you think you're supposed to do when you get to these places?
It's funny. I'll feel a lot of times I'll feel like just going on a walkabout by myself. And it's almost always when the energetic ley line type stuff happens is when I'm off by myself. One of them was big in New Zealand whenever I hiked Mordor, um, Alpine Tungaroo Alpine Crossing. But I didn't know I was going on it at all until 5 o'clock at 5:30 at night. I just ask everyone in town what is there to do in this town. They say, "Oh, hike Tungaroo before it closes. It's going to close any day." Well, I hiked the last day of that year. And after I did it, I find out that people train for 6 months before they go do it. I knew about it less than 12 hours before I got on the bus to go do it on the shuttle.
Yeah, that was quite a story.
Yeah, I shared the whole story of how that worked out with my Chinese friend, and that I had a guide and a helper. Thank goodness, because I don't think I could have done it by myself. I don't think there's any way. So thank goodness they had me a little friend helper that I was feeding and taking care of him. It worked out to be a win-win situation. I don't know until I'm there. And
Hmm.
for instance, one time Mike and I went to Hovenweep I just kept feeling like I needed to go for an equinox alignment. I love that almost all of our sacred sites on this planet before colonization and the horrors that happened during that, all of these were aligned with different astrological phenomenon. Some of them with the solstice and the equinoxes, but some of them with uh, the Lion's Gate and Orion's Belt and the Pleiades and different things like that. All the different ones are every sacred site on this planet is astrologically aligned with something from what I've seen. And I just kept feeling it to go to one for an equinox. So I try to do a minimal search. I purposely don't research before I go. I wait until spirit shows me and then I research afterwards. And I don't know when I figured this out, but I figured it out pretty early on that I wanted to know intuitively first. And so I just find out where the campground was. And Mike and I actually went the day after equinox because of my sensitivities. We knew that the alignment would be the same, but it wouldn't have all the crowds. So it was on purpose that we went one day after the equinox. And sure enough, we got in like at 10:30 at night. It was dark. I had no idea where the trailhead was that led to the Hovenweep Castle. It's a castle, but it's built by Native Americans. Um, I didn't have any clue where it was. We went to sleep. We just set up our tent, went to sleep. I woke up before the sun around 5:30, and I wake Mike up out of a dead sleep. Honey, my feet are about to take off without me, and I have no pants and no coffee, and I can't do this. Help me find pants. So we laughed that my feet will take off without me. Give her coffee and pants. It's important. I need those two things. And so he helps me and we get the coffee and pants. And I mean, I'm like, I'm taking off. And he's like, "You're serious, aren't you?" I'm like, "My feet are going to go without me. I must go now." And so he's running to catch up. And I just take off, not knowing how to get there or anything else. And my feet take us straight to the castle. And when we get there, the sun comes up literally right when we got into place. I was on one side, he was on the other. And the alignment went through us and through the building perfectly.
Hmm.
And I had no idea where I was going and what the time was or anything. My feet knew, and I
Hmm.
had to follow them.
So what happens at these when you experience that? Is that like a an energetic like
There's
recharge for
activations.
you, or what happens?
You can feel it. It's an energetic activation. Like the first
Mhm.
time I went to Uluru, my chakra once spun like nobody's business
Mm.
at Uluru. The first time that was 2003, and the way I got there was complete miracle. I was held down by Archangel Gabriel for 3 days before that class was even planned, telling me I was going to go on it and what was going to happen if I did. And I had rolled my change for gas money to drive to St. Louis to be told, "Oh, I'll see you in October." And I ended up getting a job at the theater for a show that was going to go. It's a Broadway show. They're going to tour, but we work 2 weeks straight, really hard work for about 4 grand to get them ready. But it got me ready to go to Melbourne. It was all perfect timing, exactly synchronistic.
So then what happens after these experiences? Do you feel like your abilities are heightened?
I
What
definitely
happens?
think that they've been honed. Things are so clear now than they were when I started. So I definitely, and I also, another thing that I've noticed, for instance, I went to the Serbian museum for Tesla, for Nikolai Tesla. And I was there with his ashes, and I got to hold a fluorescent light next to the Tesla coil, and it just lights up. You don't have to plug it into anything, just holding it. I've loved Tesla for a very, very long time, so it was so neat to go to Serbia to his museum. But I didn't realize a lot of these higher beings that I connect with at different places still are riding with me on one level or another. Because I was walking through Chaco Canyon and I could feel Tesla inside of me getting all excited, going, "Look, it's a time machine!" And he started pointing out pueblos and where they're aligned at, and said, "Look, look, look! It's a time machine!" And he was so excited. Um, After we went to Wounded Knee, when we left, I had a whole thing from Crazy Horse come in, and I know exactly where his frequency was. His frequency is different than any other frequency I've ever felt ever.
Hmm. How so?
And it's a low, bzzz, but it's right here. It's very powerful, very, very, very powerful. And there's little moments he decides to goose me still to this day, and I know his because it's different than anybody else's. And it was funny because we were leaving Little Bighorn. We'd gone to, I was in a half marathon in Yellowstone with some of my family, and we were coming back, and we decided to do a little tour when we were coming back. And we stopped by Little Bighorn, and as we left Little Bighorn, my knee would not stop hurting until I finally said, "Are they trying to get us to go to Wounded Knee?" And as soon as I, yes, my knee quit hurting. But I've been to so many different places of massacres of, that's what started my path, was it happening here at Gran Quivera. The first thing I saw, I think I was about 22, 23. And that was one of the first visions I actually remember having. And it happened in first person. So I could feel it. I could feel all the dehumanization, everything that they did to these people in order for it to be right for them to do what they were, the horrors that they were doing. They'll take me to them themselves, to those locations. And it's happened in Bali, it's happened in Vietnam, it's happened all over the planet.
So when you go there, what are you doing exactly? Are you helping these souls to cross to the other side that haven't, or what is
I
the
am
purpose?
maintaining the highest frequency I can. I do have the doorway to the Rainbow Bridge from some things that happened to me in my youth. And the way that I found out I had it was long before I even met any from the teaching with you guys. It was at a Eagles concert. But longer story, and I'm not going to go into all that right now.
Well, you
But
told us that story already.
okay, see, I've already told that story. That
Hmm.
yes, I do have. It's not. I can't force anybody to go anywhere, and I don't even call it clearing because I don't have anything against, and I don't think they're bad energies that you have to clear. I don't think it comes to that. I open the door, and if they choose to go through, they can, and most have chose to.
Hmm.
One of the reasons one reason Petra did help me as much as she did, she knew I had the ability to do that, and she bought a lot of my tickets just to get me on location. Because you can't it you those I cannot I can do a lot of my energy work remotely, but that so far I've had to be in person to do.
Hmm.
I had a whole thing happen in Oahu at Pearl Harbor that I remembered
Hmm.
praying for them in third grade. I was 8 years old, but I had to be there in person to help them.
So all this travel that you're set to do is all part of that?
I think it's continuation of it. I did have to get well. I did need to, not only that, Mike and I are completely renegotiating our experience with our um, relationship, and we're coming into harmony when we had a very toxic relationship for a long time. I don't think we could have traveled together. Maybe now we can. We're going to try it first. We're going to go to Peru together. Uh, and then I'm going to go to UK. Hopefully, it all works out. I think it all. I've already seen the green lights goes. But the coolest thing is I have had visions of the Peru before, and I've also had heads up about UK before. So it's almost like I'm picking up where I left off and where they told me I was going to start heading to next. It just took a few years to get back healthy enough to do it and to start learning how to navigate, even if I do have some sensitivities. Like we talked to in Peru, that we may check a bag with all of our camping equipment and tent, and they were down with that. So that way, if the hotel's extra stinky, we'll find a place for me to pitch a tent. When I went to Hawaii, my friend was able to get a hold of an Airbnb, and she very willingly went to Costco and called us. What kind of cleaners can I get for your friend? And she was actually so impressed. And I walked into one of the others. She cleaned with the others, and I got sick right away. And she's like, "Okay, I'm just moving to these products altogether." And she completely changed her products from it. But
Nice.
you know, didn't realize there might be ways of doing it.
Well, when you're supposed to do it, they will find a way.
Whenever I went to Roswell, when I was driving into town, and I've been to Roswell 100 times in my life, at least. I used to always go down there for shopping with my dad for Christmas and for school for my kids. But there was a certain point whenever, and I knew it whenever I crossed it, there was a complete change of energy, and I knew that a ley line had activated. So even though I'm in my home state, it can still happen even around me. Um, when I was in France, it was when the Knights Templar told me that they were coming through New Mexico through portals. And then I figured out later that Chimayo and some of these I'm pretty sure that they're the ones that left the cross at Chimayo for it to even be what it is. Um, but they had told me at the same time that they had some energy for me, and they wanted me to return it, take it to Washington and New York City. And I come back, and they were having classes, and I think it was over in California. And a big group of Vietnamese from Vietnam, from Hanoi, actually, one was from Saigon, almost everyone else was from Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City in Hanoi, um, came, and I spent with me for a whole week in St. Louis. And I'd totally forgotten this message I'd gotten in France. And I drive them to the airport, and I drop them off, and I'm driving home, and I get a call from one of the Vietnamese kids still in California. She hadn't come to St. Louis. Cinda, we're wanting to go to New York, and Mimi's trying to figure it out for us, and it's just a nightmare. Can you help us? Can you help us go to New York? I'm like, yeah, I go to New York all the time. I was there a lot. So I find us a place in Queens next to the subway at a third what they were trying to get them for a hotel room. And we go, and I picked them up at Kennedy airport, and she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, by the way, we're hoping to go DC for the day. Can we take the train to DC?" And that minute I remembered my guidance from France that I had to go to New York and DC to travel to take this energy. And I didn't have to do anything. My life took care of it and took me there. I think the planetary grid is being reactivated. I don't think it's been really activated since Avalon. So I think it's real funny that I'm wanting to go to Avalon. There are other people doing it too, and it's activating. And I would never deny somebody else's experience doing it right now. But I do think that it's coming back online due to what a lot of us are doing.
So, how does that, I mean, what does that entail exactly? That you're,
One thing, as the veil gets lighter and less heavy, people are going to be able to access their light abilities much easier and be able to have telepathy with ancestors that have crossed over, or high beings, celestial beings, ascended masters, etc. And there will be a lot more star beings, that there will be a lot more telepathy and people trusting their telepathy the more that we get the planetary grid. But the multidimensional planet functioning multidimensionally instead of um, culture came and took over nature. That's what happened in colonialism, and they knew where they were massacring and why. And they laid a veil literally over the grill of the planet to keep us from accessing these natural abilities that we have as multidimensional beings.
it's kind of like that Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty.
There's no intelligent life down here. The thing is we have it. We've just been really conditioned to believe we are only third dimensional. So that way they can control. And fear only works in the third dimension. It doesn't work in the multidimensional aspect. It only works in the third dimension. And they've got us scared of everything that's beyond multidimensional. You hear that it's evil. Don't you dare touch that, because you might find your answers there and it's not from them, in my humble opinion. And I do think there is some nefarious as well, and some people can be like a bull in a china, think no they know what they're doing in the multidimensional and they don't. I think that happens as well. I think I stay extremely humble because I know it's way bigger than what I can understand. So I sit on the floor and ask for help understanding because it's so big.
So, what if there are people that are trying to find these portals?
The way I didn't know I got I got chosen. I just started seeking spiritually. I did not start seeking any of that. It was almost an accidental, but I have a calling. And I figure if somebody wants to, it means they have a calling. Why else would they want to? Follow your calling, follow the feeling. Notice energy shifts when you go to the locations. Greet the guardians, greet the invisible beings when you get there, and ask for help and open yourself to their help and sit on the floor. Don't think you know better. That's probably the hardest part right there, because we're being asked to let into a world that we don't know yet, that we haven't seen yet.
So, what if someone doesn't know about this concept of greeting the high beings when you go to a place? And then what happens?
Well, if they understand subtle energy, they understand that they've been called and they can feel that subtle energy when they go to where they're called at. If they don't, a lot of people just think it's that they're traveling, and I think there's people out there doing some of the work and never even know they're doing it because they're not necessarily spiritually inclined. Doesn't mean I don't think that they could be doing some of it. I think they can, because somehow or another humans are a multidimensional key for the multidimensional planet.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't think I asked that question correctly.
Say it again then.
It's all right. We can continue that topic.
You mean to ask how? If they don't know how? It's literally just a thought in your head. Thank you for helping me to get here. Show me if there's anything that I need to do while I'm here. Help me. Literally, just very simply.
And so by doing that, you're opening yourself up to the higher vibrations so that they can kind of open your eyes more.
They do run on free will. They're there ready to help, but we do have to ask their help because they're not going to cross that boundary. There's such a respect. There's a respect for us and our human experience, and there is a respect for our free will. And out of that, they're just there waiting for us to ask and to communicate. And I don't think anybody's alone, honestly, ever. Because if nothing else, you've got ancestors looking after you. There's some great grandma that really does care what happens to you and is keeping a good lookout, for instance. But especially with celestial beings and real high frequency, they're not going to come in without an invite. Most of us hit our knees when we ask. I know that was true for me. But there was also I don't know, I think very well I was born a spiritual seeker. I had to have come in with a mission because I was 12 reading the book of Revelations. What 12-year-old does that? But I was also reading Linda Goodman's Sun Signs and Moon Signs.
Well, you're a whole other, you're in a realm all by yourself.
I'm a weirdo, but that's okay.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
A woo-woo weirdo.
All right. So it's a good place to stop, and we can continue this conversation next time. Huh?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you for joining us today. We hope to continue the multidimensional aspect of our talk from
Yes.
here.
Yes. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening.
I'm at syndicate.com if you'd like an appointment.
All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Ciao.